guys, I'm Shweta and this is Bhavik, and we've recently immigrated to the UK from South Africa. So, in this video, we're sharing the costs, the process, the timelines, and some tips and tricks that we learned along the way. Just to note that this is not financial advice, and the cost that we're sharing later on might not necessarily be the cost that it is currently. It obviously changes with the exchange rate. So basically, it all started a year ago. We played around with the idea of immigration, and fast forward a few months towards the end of the year, I was offered an opportunity where I could work from home and work remotely, basically. We then obviously started chatting about immigration in more depth, and thereafter, Bhavik put out some feelers to work in the UK. So there's a few visas you can come over on. So you have your ancestral visa, your spousal visa, and your skilled worker visa. And we were only eligible for the skilled worker visa because we don't have any roots or anyone in the UK or any links in the UK. So we knew that one of us had to get a job in the UK for us to be able to move here. It was definitely quicker and possibly easier for Bhavik and the work that he does because his job is on the skilled worker shortage list. So he'll tell you more about his job and how he found his job now.
So I was fortunate enough that I found my job that suits my role pretty quickly. Many people use LinkedIn, UK job listing sites, which I think is also pretty useful. I would have definitely used that as well. Mine was pretty quick in that I searched for my role. I found a company and applied for it, and that was pretty quick. That was basically it. And within the next day, there was an interview. A few days later, there was an offer. So we were actually surprised by that, how quick it took. I would definitely recommend as well, if you're thinking about the process, then definitely look on LinkedIn and the UK job listing sites as well.
Once the whole process with the job offer was completed, Bhavik had to verify and get a medium of instruction from his university that he was taught in English. And thereafter, he got the sponsorship certificate from his new work, which then enabled us to really start the process in terms of the TB test, and thereafter submit our application for the skilled worker visa to move over. So the skilled worker visa allows you to live and work in the UK for 3 to 5 years. You can either come over by yourself or you can bring along your dependents. And so that's the route we took. Basically, the whole process took us around 4 months, which is relatively quick. And when we go in depth shortly, you'll see the kind of breakdown of the timeline of that. And even getting approval on our visa was really, really quick compared to some of the information we've gotten from other people and how long the process took. So let's get into it. So while I've given an overall immigration timeline, I kind of wanted to point out that I moved over on a unmarried partner dependent visa, which is quite different to that of a spousal or any other one, because I had to prove my relationship to the main applicant, who is obviously Bhavik, and his skilled worker visa. So I had to prove that we've been in a relationship for 2 years or more, and that we've been living together for 2 years or more. We hadn't known this before this whole process started. We didn't know that this was a very big requirement. So yeah, I'm going to share some of the documentation that we submitted. So one of the things I wanted to note here was that we did not use an immigration lawyer, even though it was definitely something we considered due to the complexity of our situation, where I am the unmarried dependent partner. Obviously, it was a bit confusing for us at the start. However, Bhavik's new employer offered him a service called the Fragaman service, which was really helpful. Basically, this was, an agency that was assigned to help us in our process. So they helped us in terms of answering questions on our application form and giving us answers to things that we would have not necessarily known had it not been for them. So that was super helpful. However, I do want to say that it is possible to do, this whole process by yourself without a lawyer. but it just depends, on the complexities and so forth. You don't always have to use an agent, but I'm glad that we did have the Fragment service, because I think without them, we wouldn't have been able to get this done as quickly as we did, and also have the questions answered, in the way that it needed to be, especially for the embassy. So I wanted to share some dates here. So on the 4th of Jan, we booked our TB test. And then we actually went in for that on the 12th of January, and obviously collecting all the documents to support our application, and more specifically my application being, the dependent partner. Took a bit of time, and so only on the 17th of January did we submit our online application, and then kind of book for our in-person appointment at the TLS contact center. I wanted to also note here that there are two kind of fees that make up the immigration, or part of the immigration cost. One is the visa fee, that's kind of, general visa application fee. And then the second one, which is quite a big one, is the health surcharge. So anyone entering the UK has to pay this amount. So it's an upfront kind of NHS amount, which I will share in the next few slides. So after we submitted our online application on the 17th of January, we booked for the 23rd of January to have our in-person visa appointment. And so on the 23rd, we went to the TLS contact center in Sandton and had our in-person appointment. And then they also took some biometrics there, like pictures and fingerprints and so forth. And then, like I've mentioned, we got an approval in 4 working days without paying for priority, which is really, really good. And I don't think that this is the usual turnaround time, because like I said, a lot of people were saying that they've waited a really long time to get the approval. So basically, once you get this mail that you can see on the left-hand side regarding a decision has been made, and I guess that's another thing, they don't tell you if successful or not, they just say a decision has been made. And so only once you open the letter attached, then you see like, okay, great, you're successful. So that's kind of some suspense there. But basically, coming back to what I was saying was, so you get this, and then a few maybe hours or days later, you get one from the TLS contact center themselves saying that your passport is ready to collect. And so this was a bit concerning for me, because Bhavik had got his email quite soon after we both got this email saying that we were successful, and I hadn't. And I kept kind of checking and tracking on the website. However, it kept, showing the same thing, and it hadn't moved. So eventually, I said to him, let's just go pick up his passport, and then we can just also ask them what's going on with mine. So that kind of took like a week or two. Eventually, we found out there was an error spelled on my surname. So I think, that took like a week or two before they corrected that. Then, just bearing in mind that you never really know how long it will take to correct this, if there is an error and stuff like that. Like it's really difficult to get hold of them. And so you're kind of at their mercy. And that's another reason to allow yourself time, because you can't be planning to leave, for example, end of February, but you don't even have your passport, like a week or two before that. And so I think based on that, we realized that we'll just kind of take it easy, not rush the process. And so we didn't book any flights or anything like that. We kind of said, let's just wait for my passport to be ready for collection. And only once I had it in my hand did we continue to book, anything. Okay, so like I said, Fragment service was very helpful, but you can totally do the application by yourself as long as you have information from your new company. I think you should be good. And then I think one of the biggest things, and I keep thinking about this when I think about the time it took to get an approval for us, was filing documents precisely and giving more documents than required. So the fun part begins now. Getting travel ready. So like I mentioned in the slide before, there was a bit of a delay on my passport, and so we didn't really want to book anything before I had my passport in my hand and confirmed that everything was 100% correct. So on the 10th of February, we booked our flights. At the time, the most cost-effective airline for us was Qatar Airways. It included 2 times 23 kg bags. Just a note that some people ship things over, but we decided to go the extra baggage route. So we purchased 1 extra bag online just before the flight. and that kind of works out a little bit cheaper than purchasing it at the airport itself. Cost saving tip here was we opted to wrap our bags ourselves instead of at the airport. I used booking.com to book our temporary accommodation, and then I also got 10% off our taxi from Heathrow to Reading. So let's talk immigration costs. I think this is the one that most people are very curious about, and rightfully so. Immigration is a really costly process, and so I wanted to be as open as possible about the costs of our immigration. So there were two main costs for us throughout this process. Basically, the one being the IHS, so Immigration Health Surcharge. That's basically an upfront amount, for the NHS for 3 years, because we're on a 3-year visa, and then the visa cost itself. So the IHS, the Immigration Health Surcharge, was around 40,239 Rand at the time that we paid for it in January 2023, and then the visa cost was around 10,296 Rand when we paid for it. Also remember your TB test, and that was 2,500 Rand in January 2023. Then some other costs that you'll obviously incur are your flights, extra baggage if you're bringing any, and then obviously your taxi or your transportation from Heathrow or whichever airport you're landing at to your final place. So yeah, these are some of the costs that are involved. Obviously, this is not all. There are definitely more costs in between that crop up. So one of the final parts of our immigration process was bringing over our pet, Pablo. So I think my biggest advice here is definitely getting a few quotes before deciding on a pet travel agency. The quotes that we got were very varied in terms of cost. Some of them were at least 10 to 20,000 Rand more than others. However, there were different things included in that final amount. So get a few quotes and decide what's best for you and for your pet. You can definitely DIY, so do it yourself. But for us, this meant one of us going back to South Africa and then getting a Schengen visa, so we decided against it. Some breeds have different requirements to others, so definitely do your research. For example, Pablo is a Pekingese dog, so his breed can't fly directly into London. They would have to be on a flight that has a layover. Then consider where your pet will be when you come over. So if they're coming over, when you fly or very close to when you move over, will you be at a pet-friendly B&B, or how will that accommodation arrangement work? I think one of my final points here is join Facebook groups to get more information. One of the groups that was recommended to us was the Embark group, which is South African pet parents leaving South Africa, and that was super informative, and we got a lot of information from that group. In fact, we've also found Pablo's travel buddy through the Embark group. So definitely a group to check out if you're considering bringing your pet over or immigrating with a pet. Okay, so I've just put Pablo's immigration costs here in the table. So from an agency perspective, we paid them 27,700. Then vaccination before titer. So vaccination and titer test are vaccinations are mandatory. They need to be up to date before the titer test can be done. So Pablo's last vaccinations were done in February 2022, so it wouldn't have covered him through the titer test and throughout this year. And so we had to do it 1 month before we could do the titer test. So the vaccination cost was 747 Rand. That was in Fourways in Johannesburg. Then the titer test is usually done 3 months before the intended travel. We did that in January, and so only 3 months later, which was kind of like end of April, was Pablo allowed to travel. So just a note to keep these timelines at the back of your mind when you are booking things, and it's so easy to get caught up in your own sort of travel admin, and you kind of don't realize that these things need to be done if you're considering taking your pet over. Then some other fees that kind of caught us off guard were the custom clearance fees. We really weren't aware that this was going to be such a big amount, but yeah, that's one of the big fees that we have to pay, and then the VAT and advance fees. So yeah, the overall total is around 43,000 plus minus to bring Pablo over. It really is going to vary and differ per dog. Also, if you have a different breed, if your dog is bigger or smaller. This is just our experience and the amount that we're paying for Pablo. Okay, so before we wrap up this video, I just wanted to touch on this very quickly. So, the emotional side of immigration. One of the biggest points I think that I'd like to share is knowing your why. Knowing your why just kind of gives you that extra motivation, and when things get tough, you can focus on the reason, behind this move. And I think that's so important. So, things are going to get tough. It's going to get tough physically, emotionally, and it's definitely a financial strain as well, moving your life over, really. So just know your why. I think be so certain in the reason that you are moving, and I think you should be good. Then having a good support structure that you can count on. Like I mentioned, times get really tough, both before the days that you leave, or before the time that you leave, as well as once you have come over and after the excitement of it all kind of fades away. So having a support structure that you can rely on, that you can speak to and vent to, on certain things and about certain things, I think that's so important. It does get lonely. It really is such a lonely process. So having people around who can support you is very important. Then soaking up as much quality time with loved ones. So we were lucky to be able to spend quite a bit of time with our loved ones before we left South Africa. So we had a few get-togethers, and yeah, I think soaking up the time was very important because we also made memories with our loved ones before we left. So definitely, schedule in some time to just spend time with people. It does get tough because you're kind of doing all this planning and preparing, but really don't forget that you also need to, soak up the quality time. Then I can't stress this one enough, guys. Eat all the South African food you love. You're probably not going to find something even remotely close to it here. So eat all the South African food. Finally, what I wanted to say was enjoy the process. So this is really much easier said than done. And I think, to my point earlier on, there's so much going on. There's so much of planning and things to, be worried about, and all the decisions that you need to make. And if you're anything like us, we had to pack up our apartment in South Africa before we left. So that was at the end of February. So there were all these things going on, and I think in between it all, we really had to stop and realize, like, wow, this is actually happening. And I think when you stop and take a break and kind of realize what's actually going on, that's the only time you're going to kind of enjoy the process, because other than that, it kind of just feels like you're on autopilot trying to get things done. So yeah, stop, look around, take a breath, go out for supper with your loved ones, just enjoy it. You're probably never going to get the time back ever. Well, you really aren't going to get the time back, but what I mean to say is that you're probably not going to experience this again, or if you are, it's not going to be very soon again. So just enjoy the process. With that said, I think we've come to the end of this video. I just wanted to say that I really hope that this has helped you if you're thinking about immigrating or you are in the immigration process. I would love for you to leave me some feedback if you want to know anything more, and thanks for watching.